What's up, guys? We're here with Bootsty Greenwood. Came across this guy on YouTube, I'd say maybe a month and a half ago. And I've mentioned a few times that I'm a big fan of the book Reality Transurfing. And from what I've gathered, this guy has 10 years, I think, of studying this book. Am I correct in saying that?
Almost. I'm a couple years shy of 10 years,
I
but
mean, we can
yeah.
just round it up, but regardless, so he has extensive knowledge on the sub, on the book itself, and makes amazing content on YouTube. That kind of makes the book much more tangible and palatable for the average person. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have you as a guest. But yeah, I've kind of given you a brief introduction, but I'd love to know more about you and what you do.
Yeah, man. No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. That's so cool that you found me on YouTube and then here we are talking on a podcast a month out. I think that's very, very neat. Yeah. So about me and this particular topic, like I got really curious about it. I found it kind of like strangely in 2016, maybe 2015, 2016, something like that. And I just, for whatever reason, just became obsessed with it. I found the first chapter online based off a course that I was taking at the time. And I just blew right through it and then ordered all the books because it's actually a series of 5 books that they have consolidated into one volume called Reality Transurfing. Strange name, very mysterious. The cover's mysterious. The whole book itself has this interesting kind of mystique around it. But I just couldn't help myself. And at the time, no one was really talking about it. But this particular book took a lot of different pieces of philosophy that I really resonated with, and then just put it underneath of an umbrella that kind of like seemed to pull from a lot of different ideologies and perspectives. And so it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I really resonated with it. So I started making videos about it on YouTube and wound up, helping a lot of people understand the concepts from a simple level. I consider myself to be a blue collar mystic. I'm from West Georgia. I'm super into spirituality and stuff. But I grew up, in around a bunch of pine trees and meth, so that's my background. So as far as like keeping things simple, we have a saying in Georgia, it's like keep it simple, stupid. I mean, a lot of people probably claim that saying, but there's a lot more stupid people here. So I think we should get credit for it. But I really try to make things as approachable and easy to understand and practical as possible. That's what I feel like my gift is, or my mission is, as far as like explaining different spiritual concepts. And this particular book was so fascinating. It covered such a broad range of topics and ideas that it really blew my mind. As far as like a compendium of reality, there's only a few to choose from, with the obvious, holy books excluded. There's another one called My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell, which is very heady and it's a little bit more dry. Reality Transurfing is more poetic and artistic and beautiful in that way. Thomas Campbell's a scientist. I mean, he's like straight up a scientist. So it's about quantum theory. And Reality Transurfing explores quantum theory too, which is a huge buzzword right now, especially in the spiritual space, and manifesting. But Reality Transurfing has its own sort of, I would say, bent on these ideas and topics, and it adds a lot to the picture that things like the law of attraction and major manifestation ideas like the secret don't really address.
Yeah.
So I found it, got obsessed, and then just started making videos on YouTube about it. And I've been using the principles in it for, yeah, the past 8 or 9 years.
Wow, that was quite the introduction there. Thank you for sharing. But yeah, no, when it comes to what you said there about reality transurfing, a lot of people would say to me, "Oh, like you should read The Secret, Ben. You should read The Secret." And I'm like, "I'm reading reality transurfing. You need to read this. If you think The Secret's good, you haven't even we're that's like kindergarten compared to transurfing. But yeah, like you said, it's a almost poetic. I see it more as like a therapeutic experience. The book is to me is an experience. It's like you can't go through that book start to finish and be fully the same person you were before, which I think is, is pretty cool. But you kind of broke it down a little bit. What is reality transurfing if you were to explain that?
It's lucid dreaming and waking life.
Okay, wow. See, this is why we got you on because that's a very good answer. Could you go into more detail with that or
Sure. Yeah. So, the idea, if anyone has ever had a lucid dream, if you know what that is, it's when you become awake, you're aware that you're dreaming, and you can essentially just do whatever you want in the dream. And so the way that the author explains that is that we're two-part beings, and this is across all esoteric literature, right? Like, to be completely honest, is there anything brand new in reality transurfing? No. There's nothing new in any of these books. There's thousands and thousands of books written about these things. You just got to find the thing that resonates for you and go with that. This was the thing that stoned me, so to speak, and so other people are going to have their own, their own different models that they really like and jive with. And I say all that to say too, like I'm not entirely a purist either. It's like I think there are some things that transurfing brings up that it doesn't really tell you how to work on or fix. But as far as being like a model of what's going on, I think it does an amazing job of doing that. I mean, you can't answer every single thing in one book, but basically, what he says is that we're two parts. And this is, again, this is true all across esoteric literature, whether it's Hermetic magic, Kabbalah, it doesn't matter, all of it. We're heart and mind, or conscious and subconscious beings, right? And so when you're in a dream, what Vadim says is that your subconscious mind is basically playing in the infinite archive of possibility, right? The dream space itself represents infinity, or the mind, which are we have imagination, we can dream all these different things up. All that stuff actually already exists in infinity, right? Like infinity's real, it's already provable. So everything that you could think of or conjure, whatever. This is why you see things in dreams that you've never seen in real life. You're like, what the hell is that monster with seven noses and like six eyes and this weird bulge? And it's floating, right? And so you're like, I've never seen this anywhere, right? Like it's completely unique. So in infinity, that is the dream space. They're synonymous. And then we have physical reality. So we have the metaphysical reality of ideas and every possibility and infinity and all that. And then we have the physical reality, the material reality. That's where we're at right now. This dense, inert place that's made of matter as science, kind of explains it its way. So that's really where the mind kind of lives. The mind lives more in the material world. The heart lives more in the metaphysical world, the immaterial. And what happens in a lucid dream is your heart and mind realize that you're in a dream. And so they both work together, and then they can consciously direct the script of that dream. That you can do whatever you want. You can fly, you can talk to whoever you want. You can get ideas and all kinds of different things like that. And so the idea of reality transurfing is that state of lucid dreaming is possible also in waking life. In fact, that is our natural state. We should be lucid dreaming in real life. At that's how humans are supposed to live or can live, and maybe have even lived long ago in the past, if like Atlantis was a thing or whatever. How were the pyramids built? This idea kind of, there are these principles, they kind of lend their hand to how some of these things that are, miraculous that we've seen in the past may have happened, but that in waking life we can have that alignment as well. Our heart and mind can agree, and then when that happens, intention is formed. And intention is a power unlike any other. It's not desire, it's not hope, it's not expectation. It's a very specific, if you were going to say magical power, like any magic, they're working on basically bringing intention to the world, right? Like I don't think about moving my finger, I just do that and it's done. That's what intention is. It's not like a hope or a desire. But I guess it's kind of a long explanation of what it kind of means to basically wake up. Like we're kind of asleep, all of us, at least at different points during the day. We're not conscious. We're basically following a script and we're not really embodying our true and authentic selves. But if we were able to connect our mind and our heart together and have them basically work on the same team, then we could consciously direct our life like we could consciously direct a lucid dream. And so that is the basic essence of the book. And there's a lot of there's a lot of nuance, but I'll let you
Yeah, that was
comment
incredible, man.
and
That was an incredible explanation. I mean, that was, because I've read this book twice now, and you've just kind of put that all together so well. But yeah, I think we'll dive deeper into some of the things you mentioned, like intention and the heart and mind connection. But just to take it back to you, because you have a great understanding of this book, like where. And you said it came at a pivotal point in your life. So what's the story with that? How did the book transform your life and put you on the trajectory you're on now?
crippling depression, lack of answers, being broke, hopeless. Yeah, I just didn't have. I had looked and looked and looked and looked and looked and read a ton of different spiritual books, self-help books, esoteric material. I mean, you name it, you know. And then I still was struggling at it at a certain time. This was around, yeah, 2014, 15, somewhere around there. Whenever it was that I kind of like found the book. And it opened up a whole other world for me because it just married so many concepts together that I liked from other books. And it made sense. It was like, oh, okay, well, this is why this happens. This is why that happens. There's one particular idea in the book. Well, I see it. First of all, I'll just say this. I didn't know my heart and mind could work together, right? Like I thought those were compartmentalized completely. But I mean, every esoteric book really is bringing those worlds together, you know, but reality transurfing just, it was the one that hit me with it and it made the most sense. So when I read about another concept called pendulums, which I'm sure we'll cover, that completely blew my mind as well. Like it totally shifted the way that I viewed reality and the way that I interacted with reality and groups of people and understood how those dynamics worked, as well as addiction. It helped me a ton with addiction. And so yeah, that's where I was when I found the book. I was no stranger to self-help material, and then I found it and it just answered so many questions. And I don't know, maybe I'm tapping into a similar place in the dream space, the infinite film roll archive, the alternative space, space of variations, whatever you want to call it, the metaphysical, and can just kind of like jive with it or whatever. But it just made sense to me. Like I just like for whatever reason it just landed, and when it landed, I wanted to share. I got excited. I was like, "Holy shit, this is amazing!" And it's so helpful, and it helped me so much that I just wanted to give out as much about the material as I could. That's what I was inspired to do.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I have my own, men's coaching business, and I've noticed myself recently with clients, I'm just like, you know what, just go read Reality Transurfing. Just go read it. Like I could sit here and try but you just need to read that book and I know a lot of your problems will solve themselves. And then my clients are like, oh man, like, and they're using terms of the concepts of the books. And I'm just like, for anyone that comes, yeah, even friends, I'll be like, just read that book. It will, there'll be something in there that will move something for you in a certain way. So yeah, it's amazing. So as a result though, what are some of the achievements you would kind of attribute, like, maybe something in your life you've achieved that you would kind of give credit?
Sure. Yeah. So I've had quite a few things. I've started a few different businesses. I was able to work and do hosting MC work and comedy on cruise ships. Um, let's see. I mean, I got IMDb credits. I've produced
Oh,
prank
nice.
shows and movies, all different kinds. Wrote on a show. Yeah, I've had a lot of amazing things happen to me that prior to finding that book, there's no, I just don't see how it would any of those things would have ever happened. I'm about to do. I'm a co-founder of the Athens Comedy Fest here where I live, and we're about to produce that as the first inaugural Comedy Fest here in Athens, Georgia, and really excited about that. I get to be a part of that, and I'll be hosting and performing comedy on it. So these are things that I would have never even considered for myself. Starting a business, really, maybe I would have considered it, but I don't know if I would have ever actually done that. Quitting smoking, quitting several different habits that were not good for me, and yeah, starting a business, and some of them were actually successful. Like starting a coaching business. I have a coaching business now that I do, and I teach some of this stuff in there along with other modalities, right? And yeah, dude. I mean, the list is going to continue to grow. Like I'm working on some amazing things right now that I can't wait to share. I've got a YouTube channel. I never would have had a YouTube channel if I didn't read this book to share the stuff about the book, right? So,
Yeah,
so many things. And then, it's helped me too in like really challenging times because it's like, I don't know. I think I had the expectation that there wouldn't be challenges. I was like, oh, I can just, glide right through this. And you kind of can actually, but there's still going to be those moments where reality is compressing, it's changing, it's not what you expect. And you have to sort of learn to be comfortable with uncertainty. But once you start to see the principles work, it gets easier and easier to be comfortable in the face of uncertainty. That's probably the best skill you can have, is like when it looks like the world's on fire, you're just like, this is fine.
yeah. That's definitely, yeah, that's a big concept. A couple of things you said, like the one thing, because I remember the book saying that is that, there's realities that, there's a potential within you that you can't even fathom, and that exists, in the alternative space. And yeah, that's something I've struggled with a lot is just I'm very like not I'm controlling, but I like a plan. I like the plan to play out how I imagine, but life isn't really like that. And the book kind of helps you kind of navigate through that those periods. So yeah. But what would you say what would you say the biggest component of that success is? Would you say it is that connection to heart and mind that allowed you to align with all these, all these passions and projects that you've kind of undertaken?
I would say that's probably number one, along with being able to be emotionally resilient and calm in the face of challenges and stuff. Like I love, what you just said. You're like, I want to have control and do that, and I'm like, yeah, you masculine man, you. How fucking dare you? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I curse on
Yeah,
here? Is that
of course.
okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
But I'll try not to. It's not my normal course of, but I do comedy sometimes at night. So in order to emphasize a point, maybe so. But I think that's something that I see with a lot of men, right? Like we're so tight and like clingy energy, and we want to see an outcome. We want to control things. And
Hmm.
it's like we have to learn how to let go. Like that's the biggest thing I think, for me that I am working on. And that is it is a bit of a struggle. He even says that really intention's not the problem, right? Like we've got enough intention.
Yeah.
There's plenty of gas, right?
Hmm.
We're just also pushing the brake down. So like we generate a lot of importance and have all these ideas that we begin to project into the world. Those challenges become real, whether they were real or not in the first place. So a lot of this stress is self-generated. We're projecting it out there, not even realizing that we're doing it, right? Like it's pretty subconscious by now. And we're creating our own resistance to the thing that could be just as easy as how he calls walking to the box,
Hmm.
walking to the newsstand to buy a paper, but yeah, I see that a lot. Like this is real, tightness and wanting to control. So learning to bring those two things apart. And this is also an aside, really a great lesson from the Bhagavad Gita as well, is focusing on the action and not the fruit of the action itself, and learning to shift and not worry so much about the way that things are coming into materialization, but focusing on the end goal itself and taking any actions that are required to get there without trying to control or manipulate the situation. And he does a really good job with that. explaining that and what importance is. And so that would be another thing that I would attribute some of my success to. Because a lot of the opportunities that I got would have never, they were not even on my radar, right? Like the best opportunities that I got were often things that I couldn't even have conceived of myself.
Hmm.
And so to stay open and to be able to play in that realm with the world, like the universe will just throw you surprise parties, and you didn't even see it coming. If you can, kind of stay in that frame of mind and allow it to happen. One of the biggest concepts in the book is to allow yourself to have. Like that's like the last block. Some of us just don't feel like we deserve it. It's not for us, you know. But the book definitely, um, I'd say it at least acknowledges that, if not gives some really practical tools for opening that space up within ourselves and allowing ourselves to have. So that would be another thing as well that I
Yeah.
would add.
No, yeah, I agree. I think and we'll touch on this in a bit, the inner and outer intention, but there's enough logic and everything is in our society is, oh, love is just a chemical reaction in the brain. Oh, depression is just a chemical imbalance in the brain. Everything's being forced into the mind, and it's like no one really considers the heart. And I feel like that's the spiritual element of our society, which I think is growing as time goes on, but for a long time, or at least in like normal, I don't know, I would call it like the Matrix, people just operate purely from that head space, and they don't understand like that kind of, especially with my life, like I guess the people around me have never really understood, but it's like I'm listening to something inside of me that you can't hear or see. So it's like I don't expect you to understand, but I know inside of me what I'm doing. And it doesn't make sense to you, but I know if I deviate from this path, it won't work. It won't serve me, And it's interesting too, like when we try and control, I've had this with like business where I'm trying so hard to get the client and I do get results, but they're like very minimal results. Whereas when you just go with that, I wouldn't say, I guess you could say go with the flow, but you go with, you just kind of, it's a mixture of control, but also allowing that flow. And then it's like you start seeing results and you're getting better results, but with much less effort. And it's like, okay, so this is what's in alignment. So yeah, it's super fascinating. And that's why I think it's important because, it's not this woo-woo thing that's kind of out there. It's a very it is and it isn't, but it's very, if you can wrap your head around the concepts, it's so practical within your life. And we get it. I feel like we know these concepts already as well. That's the thing. I feel like a lot of these things within our society, we kind of have these sayings that, like Sod's Law, it talks about, these things where, yeah, and we're creating our reality with our own thoughts. But yeah, that's my little add on there. So yeah, I guess we could say we could touch on some of the concepts themselves. I mean, we could first start with the pendulums and explain what that is, because I think that's a huge concept of the book.
It
So
is. It is. Yeah,
I'd love
it
to hear
really
your
is.
thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I will explain that. I just want to say, based on what you just said, because it was a lot that you just said that was really some good stuff. Yeah, our brains are going to keep us trapped. Like they're not. It's not the bad guy, right? Like your mind is not the bad guy, but anything that the mind is certain of, which over time, and this will come into pendulums as well, over time, like we've perceived the world to be a certain way. And if you're absolutely certain, and that's your frame that you set, that this is how things are, your heart's going to go along with it. It has no other option. It's like, okay, if you say so, that's how it's going to be. So a lot of times we've put ourselves in a box. We've limited ourselves greatly because of our mind and because of these loops and patterns that kind of play in our brain. And now, where do these loops and patterns come from, right? Like, that's where we can start to get into pendulums and how energy forms and flows in sort of, I would say, like different channels, different flows or whatever, right? Like, anytime a group comes together, there's an energy that's formed by that group. And you can see this in an example at a football game or a riot or like a uh, even like a little league game or church, political party, corporate entity. They have a corporate culture. Everything that's a culture, every physical object or everything in existence is going to have an energetic component to it. And if you start working for Google or Tesla or wherever, right, like you're going to take on the form of whatever that culture is. And so that is what a pendulum essentially is. It's when a group of people come together and they have a common cause, then they're linked together by that cause. And there's some sort of energy that's formed that people just begin to serve that energy. And that energy, they basically have more or less like a kind of a master slave relationship to it. So if you go to church, it's like, oh, if you don't go to church every Sunday, you're a bad member, right? Like you could get ostracized if you don't follow the rules of that particular group.
Mhm.
And so there's all these groups in society, all of them, and we're all like aware of this at a very subconscious level of these groups, of our social norms and cultural, things that are okay, faux pas, all these things. And so all of these ideas impact us over the course of our life, and then before too long, that's how kind of the heart can be put into a box. Like all these pendulums, all these big ideas, all these groups, all these energies and collectives that basically form when human beings come together, and all of nature is kind of um under the control, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, of pendulums, right? Like these things it just happens naturally. But these things are energetic informational structures. They're entities, so to speak, but not necessarily conscious, right? Like it could be, you could liken this to demons in the Bible or what have you, principalities, powers. No one really knows. We can all speculate on what it is, but we can see the physical manifestation of it in reality. When some normal, regular person dresses in all black and then picks up bricks and throws them through a Starbucks window, right? They would never normally do that, right? Like this is just a regular person. They got swept up, the crowd, whatever happened, and then this thing happened. Or, when you go into a football stadium and one team runs out and everybody goes, hey, and they're all excited. The home team comes out, but then the away team comes out and then everyone boos, right? That's energy that's adding to that pendulum. And each one of those teams would have their own respective pendulum too, which is where things get really interesting because regardless of whether you give the pendulum negative or positive energy, you are feeding it. So back to the football example, as an example, if the home team runs out, everybody yay, and then they get all hyped up, they're getting all this energy. There's a pendulum that's created with this group energy. The home team gets all hyped up. Well, then the visiting team comes out and then everybody boo, but they're getting hyped up too because they're getting that attention, they're getting that energy. And so that is being harvested by some formation called a pendulum, whatever you want to call that. And that's what he calls it in the book. In Hermetics and stuff, they talk about egregores and creating egregores and all that kind of stuff. The idea is that in the alternative space or the dream world where everything exists there. So the more people that are paying attention to something within that place, the more sort of real it becomes, right? Like the more powerful, the more that dynamic grows. So like if, everybody gets excited about, one day there's no football team at all. And then all of a sudden the next day there's a football team. People start getting excited about it. They're radiating their thought energy at that thing. And that thing has its own pendulum, its own energetic informational structure that is part of that culture, all of those things that are part of it. So that's what a pendulum is. And that's kind of what it does, right? Like it's seeking more and more energy as everything sort of naturally does in society. That is a basic gist of it. And what I'll finish with is this. So, the thing to keep in mind is that the more we fuel whatever with our thoughts and energy, the more that we're giving it energy and creating more and more into that thing. So, back to the football example, home team runs out, yay, they're getting all this energy. Visiting team runs out, boo, they're getting all this energy. If no one did anything when the visiting team ran out, first of all, it'd be a huge mind fuck and very hilarious. But there would be no energy radiated at that team. So there would be nothing for them to feed off of. So I think a big problem with people and addiction specifically is that these addictions we internalize. And I'm like, so this is why one of the things I quit was smoking cigarettes because of this idea particularly. So it was like, holy shit, my whole life I have thought that there's something wrong with me. I have this addiction. I'll never be able to quit. It's disgusting. I'm gross. Like all the thoughts that go with that. Well, in reality, the addiction itself, that's externalized. It's not me. That's like TV, the Marlboro Man, Joe Camel, all my friends in high school, right? Like it's a whole fucking pendulum of ideas and cool from the 30s, people, you know, all that stuff, right? Like that's all this thing. And then you basically give your attention and energy over to that thing. And then now you're on its hook, so to speak. Like you are engaging with that energy. And that is really kind of like what addiction is. So when this is really helpful when you realize, like, oh, this isn't me. Like, I'm not a smoker. Like, I've just been pulled into this world of smoking, and now I don't have to do that. Now, if you try to fight against it, if you get upset, you start protesting it or whatever, now you're adding negative energy to it. So, what you want to learn basically on both sides is indifference, and to be able to just pull away and not be influenced and manipulated by whatever those particular structures are. So, I know that was a lot to say, but yeah, cults, any group at all. Like, and it doesn't make groups bad. Like, I feel like when people get this, they start seeing it everywhere and they're like, oh my God, it's a pendulum. That's a pendulum. It's like, don't worry, it's okay. You can manage your relationship to the pendulum in a way that's healthy for you, where you're getting as much energy from it as it is getting from you. The problem is when you mismanage a relationship and then you become its bitch. Like it's your pimp and you're its bitch. So that could be like you become a Lakers fan, but you go to the extreme so much that you buy all their merch and you put yourself out of house and home because you bought into it so much. You sit around and all you do is watch the Lakers on TV reruns, even when it's not the season. You see what I'm saying? Like any anything can potentially get out of balance. And so really what it's about is understanding these things, these elements that are completely natural and around us, but just learning how to navigate our relationship to it. And there's a whole bunch more that can be learned about this concept and practiced too. But I'll try to keep it as straightforward as I possibly can, even though this is a pretty abstract
Yeah.
concept. I get it.
But pendulums don't have to be negative, right? Like they can actually serve you in a positive way. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would just say that every pendulum is
The trade-off.
potentially destructive.
Got it. Yeah. Well, is it kind of like because I noticed because I used to obviously I had a 9 to 5 job, then I started my own business and the book kind of explained something in my life that I didn't really understand because when I quit my job, I was just at home and I realized that I'd kind of disconnected from all the pendulums in my life and I actually just felt a bit lost. I was like I feel like I need to be involved in a pendulum because it just gives a form of structure. It's like something that you can ride, I guess. But yeah. And also, would you agree that pendulums can be, you've talked about very grand concepts, but they could be very small. Like, I don't know, that bully who every time you see him, he does something to you and you go into your thought energy and you're like, fuck this guy. Like, do you know what I mean? That's, that's exactly what you described is the key is indifference. It's like if you feed it with positive or negative energy, it's bitch, basically. It's got a grip on you.
Yeah, yeah, it's really well said. And yeah, I'm talking about, I wanted to introduce the concept from like a macro perspective. But yeah, I mean, it literally can be annoyances and a
Could just
great
be a
example.
thought in your head.
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely can be. And so it's just a matter of monitoring and managing. The idea is so the pendulum rule is do as I do. That's the pendulum rule. Number one. The second part is to stabilize its structure and and create a hierarchy. But the first one is do as I do. Be like me. And so if you go along with whatever that culture is, then you're doing as I do, right? Like you're doing that pendulum rule. You're going to be just like everyone else. And so what you want to do is flip it on its head and you want to create your own structure. and be like, okay, well, look, I'm breaking free of this pendulum. I'm creating my own thing. And then pendulums at that point have to light you up because you're setting the trend. You're creating an energy, you're creating your own pendulum. And then that is the kind of the what transurfing instructs you to do at that point. Create your own, thing. And then as long as you don't mismanage that, which can be done too, right? But like there's a lot to consider in group dynamics, then that is ideal. The pendulum has no choice really but to light you up because you have stepped outside of its rule and become someone who's not a parody. I'd say majority of people in the world are parodies. They're not even, they're just copies of a copy. They have no idea probably who their self is. But when people can embody that true self, that authentic self, and align their heart and mind, all of a sudden, like they light up, and then pendulums serve them instead of them serving pendulums. It's still something to kind of be mindful of. But yeah, I would say that they're neutral, but all are potentially destructive. And if you're giving more energy to something uh, than it's giving you, then it's not a healthy relationship, and you should cut that out of your life.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. But yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned, I think that was the concept of frailing, right? You kind of tapped into that, but I feel like there's so like I kind of have to cherry pick a couple because I feel like we'd be here for like 10 hours. So I mean, I think that was a great explanation of pendulums, and I think it ties into this next concept of inner and outer intention because they kind of work in a way can work against each other in some cases. So if you were to kind of break down inner and outer intention, yeah, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm trying to be brief, man.
No, it's fine, man. It's fine.
I know it seems like a lot. Yeah, so
Just
inner and outer.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah. So inner and outer intention, two different types of intention. I mean, intention itself is very difficult to really define, but it's the resoluteness to have an act. So it's that thing that just makes you like I'm doing this, right? Like a great example that I like to use is two people are walking down the street. One person has to get out of the other person's way. Who is going to get out of the other person's way? The person who has the less strong intention to keep moving in their direction, right? And if they have equal, I guess they just smash right into each other. But that's more what intention is, right? Um, to kind of go from there. Now, inner intention is really more about like trying to control something. It's from inside of yourself. It's very I centered and self centered in a lot of ways, right? It's like I want this thing. This is what I want. I'm going to go and get it, right? Whereas outer intention is really about finding a middle ground between what it is that you want and what the world needs, right? So it's kind of like it's a relationship between yourself and the rest of the world that comes together and forms. That unity of heart and mind can really help to understand who we are, what our gifts are, who we are at a deep level, and then from there begin to find certain things that we can use our natural skills, strengths, talents for, and then basically walk through the door of outer intention when it presents itself. So, outer intention, let's say there's a flow of things that are kind of happening. We were talking a little bit about fighting against the flow, right? Like inner intention would fight against the flow. It's like, I'm going to do this come hell or high water. I'm going to fight, 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 fight. Whereas outer intention would be like, well, I'm going to work on this thing. This is what I'm going to do. And then looking for certain opportunities to open up in the flow of options that kind of start to happen, you would notice a door open and
Mm.
say, oh, okay, cool. Hey, oh, there's this opportunity to, work on this festival. How cool. Let me check that out, right? Like it's not something that is forced or pushed into reality. It's more something that kind of happens
It's like a
uh,
request.
naturally, right? Right. So, one of the things where I think people get really hung up on manifestation, in specifically in this sort of new age, is they have this outcome. It's very specific. they see it in their head and it should just go just like this. So that's
Mhm.
very inner intention. Okay, that is inner intention for sure. And they're trying to control the pieces like they're Lego blocks or something. It's like, no, dog, it's never going to happen for you that way. Whereas outer intention's like, I want to do this thing, I'm going to take action toward it and hope for the best. But instead of trying to control other people, first of all, that's witchcraft. Don't do that. And circumstances, which that's almost impossible. Then instead you just focus on what you need to take care of. Do the things that you need to do, and then keep your eyes open. Focus on, I would say, anything that is positive evidence that's leading you toward your goal and highlight that. Our brain does this weird thing where we make negative things way more of an impact in our system than positive things. It's just a survival mechanism. But if we can consciously start to turn that on its head, it makes it a lot easier. And that opens up our ability to notice when the opportunities are there. So if I have blinders on, then I'm not going to see an opportunity over here. Right. But if I can open myself up and say, I'm taking the actions that I'm going to take, and I'm going to open up to what the world provides. I mean, the thing is, if you have a desire in your heart, Transurfing says, if it's a true desire in your heart, then you're a child of God, a particle of God, and that's not really even your desire. That's like it's it's from
Yeah, yeah.
it's it's from up there. It's holy, or it's whatever. It's worth being fulfilled. And so if that's the case, then that should open you up to begin to trust that the universe wants that for you too, right? Like you're co-creating with nature. And that's what outer intention is. It's a co-creation process where you're doing something, but you're not doing all of it. Like the universe is kind of meeting you halfway, as opposed to you like, you know,
But would you agree you still need you still need inner intention to fulfill your so-called outer intention request?
yeah, you have to take action. Like there's a saying in the book where a guy's like, God, please make me rich. I know you can make me rich, please. And God's in heaven. He's like, least you can do is buy a lottery ticket, homie. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, yeah, this whole idea that you're just going to sit around, and I'm not trying to pick on Neville Goddard, but it just seems to be like you're just going to visualize and visualize and visualize. You can lay in bed all day and visualize whatever the hell you want. It's not going to make it just come pop into your reality. You still have to take action. Not only that, but in reality transurfing terms, if you sit around and mentally masturbate to fantasies of how good life can be, you're probably making it harder to actually get to that desired goal, that outcome, because you're generating so much importance and making such a big deal out of it. If you would just get off your ass and take some action, whatever that is, and then take appreciation in the action that you took, then that would start to move you forward in the process and the progress. You'd start to see the wave of fortune forming and begin to kind of go up, as opposed to just either staying stagnant or life getting worse.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah. I've always found, the outer intention, like on a micro scale for me, like some people say like manifesting a parking space. I mean, I used to do it in the gym a lot where it's like I would never I just started to notice I never like would go into the gym and someone's using the equipment I need. It was always like as soon as I'm walking up, they're finishing or it's free. And I'm thinking, wait, this gym is the most busiest gym in the town. Like how? But it's almost like it's not that like, okay, I need it to be free. It's like, no, it's free. I know it's free. And I'm just gonna walk up and oh yeah, I've one more set, I'm finished. And that was kind of my experience of, on a micro scale of that outer intention playing out. But it's a very kind of it's such a hard concept to kind of, it's a very personal thing to grasp. It's not like you can demonstrate these things. So it takes a level of, I guess, open-mindedness. But I think we've all experienced the outer intention at play in our life in some way, whether it be good or bad. But then also, I think, I never understood why Transurfing kept going on about lucid dreaming. And then one day it clicked. I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense because in a dream you just think of it and it comes to be, and we can do that in our reality, right? So So yeah, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to that, what I've just said there.
Yeah, man. I think there's an emotional component that most people just don't really even pay attention to, right? Like that emotional component is present in business, is present in, you know, when people meet, the energetic aspect of that, however we want to quantify it. But that is huge, right? Like if you have all this excitement and importance and frenetic energy about something, you're fucking doomed. Like you're doomed from the start. If you can't feel like it's normal, then it's not going to come into your reality. You don't quote unquote resonate with it, right? Like that's how they would say it in the new age. So I think there's an emotional component that's largely ignored that has a tremendous amount to do with the reality that we experience and the ideas of manifestation, success, personal development and growth. And these are kind of the untapped principles that he's outlining in this book to like start to notice that these dynamics are very real, and they're the dynamics that no one says. They're like, go to the gym and work out and do all this stuff and then you'll get a girlfriend. It's like, no, that's not how that works, right? Like if you understand how relationship dynamics work, then you can see all sorts of people who don't go to the gym, who don't X, Y, or Z, and they still have results in that particular area that maybe you're trying to improve in. But it's an emotional thing. I don't want to say it's a vibe, but it's kind of a vibe.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it really is. I mean, one of the more important one of the more important skills, honestly, in life, is to be able to shift your state, just to be able to be in a good energy, in a good headspace, in a good mentality, so that you can handle challenges better, you can interact with people better, you're slower to react, you're happier in general. And what's funny about it too is when we make those shifts, oftentimes it's not enough and we're upset about it too. So like that whole idea, that whole propensity of being negative is it's pretty funny. But shifting that to be able to just start to focus on positive results, even if you just write down, 5 things that happened today that you are perceiving as moving to your goal. The biggest problem with the mind is that it thinks it knows how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But we can't calculate like what the universe can. You know what I'm saying? Like even the smartest human being is no match for AI, even in a uh, in a chess match, or probably like any calculation ability. So there's all these variables, is my point, that are happening in reality that we can't even be aware of. So at a certain point, once we start to practice this, like you said, it has to be kind of experiential. But once we begin to practice it, then we start to see the results and start to understand the process. And then at that point, then the mind is certain, like, hey, this is going to be fine. It's going to work out. Over time, this is going to happen. We don't know how, but you've calmed the mind down through evidence over time. And now the heart can believe, right? It's like whatever the heart is kind of stuck with, it's stuck there. That subconscious isn't changing. We've programmed it over time to kind of have a certain set of expectations about reality and how reality works. And it's a dog eat dog world. And, they're bitch if they hungry with a new, whatever the saying is. We have a million here in the South, but that goes in your brain so much. It creates that sense of certainty in you. And then you believe that's true about the world. And so now the part of your brain that's your selective focus, they call it your reticular activation system, starts to focus on those particular evidences to confirm your theory of whatever your personal bias is. So here we are in a feedback loop all the time, right? Like confirming our own suspicions about the world, which most of those suspicions were just bullshit some dude said on a job site, or some meme that just got repeated heavily in culture or society, right? And so now we're limited by that. So the idea is to start to really create your own reality, create your own set of rules, and start to begin to open up to these principles and start trying them out. He says, don't just take it on faith, but like try this stuff and see what works for you at an experiential level. And that's what I try and encourage people to do, is to open up and like try this stuff. And like, I can save you 900 pages. If I can, I'll do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, here, just do this and try this. But as to your point, it's a completely subjective experience that each person kind of has to, um, they have to, there's no other way, but they have to try it for themselves.
Yeah. I think a key thing, interesting thing you said is, you mentioned create your own reality, but then you also said that, the heart, I've always said to people that you don't choose love, you fall in love, right? It's not a choice. And that comes from your heart. And you mentioned that, you know, the heart is pulling you in a direction, but that's not your conscious mind. That's an intelligence that goes beyond you. And that is, it is essentially God, right? So when you say create your own reality, I think I don't know, it kind of for me it's like what if what if God has a reality for me and I'm just not listening and I'm going to miss out on that because I think that's that part of the letting go where it's like, look, God has a plan for me. And, for example, the pendulums, you could liken them, like you said, to the spiritual realm of demons, right? They're pulling you away from that path because they don't want you to fulfill God's intention for you. And when you start looking at it like that, to me personally, it adds a level of seriousness because I am a believer in God, and it's like I'm not religious, but um, it's like it's almost like I have a mission I have to fulfill, and it's if I'm not following that within me, nothing else matters. I will never, do you know what I mean? Because the heart is the high, and that's the thing I've realized too, is the heart is the most powerful frequency. When you do something that comes from the heart, it has an originality to it. A piece of music you write that you didn't think it just came through you. Or even with relationships, when you speak from the heart to someone, it touches them because they're like, oh wow, that was different. But when you conjure something up from your mind, it's very like it doesn't have any power to it. And I've experienced it. I'm still in this battle myself. I'm not, that's why one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you to keep reinforcing these principles because I'm very in my head. Like I force things because it's just in my nature that kind of masculine, like and
Mhm.
I've got that in me and I think it serves a purpose. But I also think it's finding the balance of both and, pushing, but also pushing, making sure your foot's not on the brake whilst you're doing it because then what's the point, right? But yeah, I just thought I'd add that in there. But I wanted to, I mean, I am actually, we are slightly tight on time, but I did want you to touch on kind of the alternative space. And, you've talked about pendulums and everything in regards to that. But, the alternative space, what is that? Like lifelines, sectors, just kind of, okay, maybe I shouldn't have added those two in, but alternative space, or wherever you want to take
No,
it.
that's fine. No, 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 no. Yeah, there's a whole set of vernacular, that's part of this book, right? And so if you look at any other modality, they're going to talk about a lot of these same concepts. But man, I just want to touch on one thing that you just said too, where you're talking about, things coming from the heart, and that is the connection. So if you look at tarot, for instance, you'll notice that the feminine and the lover's card, you'll notice that the feminine is looking up at this angel, then the masculine is keying off of the feminine that's looking up at the angel. The man is looking at the woman. She's looking up. The heart receives inspiration from God and then communicates that to the mind. The mind can only create new structures out of old bricks, right? Like it's real good at putting a puzzle together, but that puzzle is already created, right? And so where creation comes from is from the heart. And he says in the book that anything made with soul is very expensive. And the reason why is because that is completely coming from that alternative space. It's something that has never happened before. All great inventions, they don't come from someone writing something down and dissecting. How could they? There's a great book called Sparks of Genius that they make all the kids at MIT, or used to make all the kids at MIT read. And the whole point of that book is that your brain isn't coming up with stuff, right? Like ideas come from the alternative space, the space of variations, the metaphysical. Like in the Kabbalion, the all is mind. Everything is first mental, and then it comes into physical being as the effect of being mental. So it's not like I make a sandcastle and then have an idea to make a sandcastle, right? I have the idea first. This is what manifestation is. I have an idea. And I get excited about it. I see an image in my head or have an idea in my head, however that's experienced. And then I go out and do that thing. Well, that's what creative is. And I would say co create is a great way to think about that, co creating with God. I think that's a brilliant thing. I love that you feel like you have a mission. I feel the same way, right? Like I teach purpose because of this book, right? Like his book is like calls it a goal, a goal. I feel like that's pretty synonymous to purpose. And so, I talk a lot about that all the time because I think it's important. It's a great way to stay motivated. It's a great way to stay grounded. It's a great way to really truly connect your heart with the space of variations or God. But that space of variations is basically the dream world. It is where everything exists, the eternal film roll archive. And there's a million billion and infinite movies in there. And what's interesting about it, this really helped me, and hopefully it helps somebody out there. If you're trying to accomplish a goal if infinity already exists and there's this entirety of dream space film roll archives, then whatever it is that you want to do or whatever be, it already exists in that infinite space. All the great inventions, the telephone, the microphone that I'm speaking through, all those things are in the alternative space, were in the alternative space always. They were always there. And someone tapped in through their intuition and they found the address of that or where it was in the sector of the space of alternatives, this, whatever area. And the heart figured that out. And then it communicated it to the mind. Cause he says in the book, he makes a distinction. The heart doesn't think or speak, it feels and knows.
Hmm.
And the mind thinks and speaks all the time. Boy, it never shuts up. But they're a good team. I'm not trying to like the mind is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just we need to learn how to use it properly and then give it the challenges that it wants because when the heart is in alignment with the mind, then the mind rubs its hands with glee, he says. It's really excited because it has a challenge and it has a purpose other than doubting and going against yourself, like doubting what the heart wants. But essentially, our heart is connected to that space of variations. That's why the lover's card is drawn the way it is, because our heart is connected to God and the source of all things and the space of variations and an infinite roll archive, the Akashic records, some people call. And so that is our connection to source. And so we want to focus on that as really being the place where we begin. And then the mind can kind of help with instructions. It's like the driver, or it's like the navigator. The heart is like the heart's like you know driving the car, and
GPS and
the
like the sat
yeah,
nav.
and then the mind is like the reading the map, like go here, go there. Here's where we want to do. So together they work really really well. And then anything that we ever imagine, anything in our minds that's beyond the physical, that is the space of variations. We're always connected to it at all times, and we like tap into it. But that's where all the great inventions are and were, and every single idea, screenplay, movie, everything originates there. It's the Akashic records or the Infinite Store archive.
Yeah, no, that's really cool and really interesting. We're gonna have to we've only got about, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, but there is one more question that kind of ties into what you just explained. Um, which is more personal question this time. But I've experienced it off and on throughout my life where I just get deja vu, where I'm just
Mhm.
like intense, where it's like, whoa, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just a chemical reaction or something. But to me, it's like, no, I've been here before. I've seen this person before. Like I'm in a place where it's like, there's no possible way I could have seen this before, but I have. So would you say, just throwing it out there, would you say that's somehow something that resonates with you in terms of, you know, in terms of the alternative space, or have you thought about that concept yourself or experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I've experienced deja vu quite a few times. You hear different theories on it, and I have my own. I don't think he ever mentions deja vu. Maybe he does, but I don't know. I don't know that he says anything specific about it. But to me, it's just like a confirmation.
Mm.
Like that's kind of how I read it. I'm like, oh, like I have had yesterday in the shower. Or and I'm just like, okay, I'm on the right path. That's just how I do it. And one of the things that he talks about in the book too is like omens are going to have whatever designation that you give them, right?
Yeah,
Like if you
yeah.
take it seriously, it means something bad. Well, you have just convinced yourself that that something is bad. And so I have always kind of had that suspicion about deja vu, as eerie as it is. That's just kind of how I've always felt about it. But I don't know. I think you can kind of figure have your own spin on it. Such an interesting, weird thing that happens, you know?
I mean, I've heard this concept that, time and space, time is only happening in the three-dimensional plane of existence, So it's like everything that's going to happen, everything that has happened is all happening at the same time. I mean, again, I'm not some kind of genius when it comes to this, but it's just like, I guess, like that, like you said with the alternative space, there's a reality of me right now that's, somewhere different, or a reality of me that's in like a mental asylum, or I don't know, something, where
Yeah.
it's like you're always attuning to these different paths that are taking you to different places. Um, but it's like, yeah, there's a version of you out there. So maybe you're just switching onto a something and it's like it's kind of showing you a bit of what's going to play out, or somehow you've seen what's going to happen before it happens. I don't know. It's complicated. It's probably something we're not really supposed to even understand. Like,
There are some things where it's like, yeah, there's no answer for that. And it's frustrating because like my mind and the way my mind works, I'm pretty cerebral as a person. I think a lot of people who are drawn to this book are too. That's why it's such a cool book because it's like it explains so many things. But it's like there's still some things where it's like,
go
nah,
beyond us.
no idea.
You mentioned
Nobody.
you mentioned tarot. Is that something in your own personal life you've looked into or practice or know much about?
Yeah, I really like tarot. I like the hermetic magic stuff. In fact, before I went full on into reality transurfing, I was going down that hermetic magic path. That's just where I was. I'd become, in a space where I was like, I need something. I got to get out of this. And hermetic magic definitely is an interesting um, modality, I would say. And there's a lot of overlap there. It's thousands and thousands of years old, and there's a lot of interesting aspects to it. I have a friend who's a very good magician himself. Like he went through the Golden Dawn system, and he and I talk all the time. And what we found is that reality transurfing is just magic without a cape, right? Like in magic, they have all these rituals and rites and disciplines that you're taught to do, and there are specific reasons and benefits for doing all of those things. But in reality transurfing, it's like, look, we're just trying to get to our goal. We're not necessarily trying to do seances or this or that. We're not trying to attain enlightenment or engage in any real sorcery type of stuff. It's not about that. But what happens to be is that what reality transurfing creates is intention, and that's what magical rituals are for. So basically, what I put together is that we are the ritual. Like your heart and your mind, like the whole point in doing any magical sort of thing is to align your heart and mind and bring something into reality from the alternative space. Well, reality transurfing, I can just do that. I don't have to light candles. I can still do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm certainly not trying to trash talk any of the magical systems. I think chaos magic has merit. I think hermetic magic has a ton of merit. And especially if you go through that system, the amount of discipline that it takes is amazing. Um, but I just found reality transurfing is kind of a shortcut to doing 5 years of uh, sigil writing or whatever kind of different things are involved in that. And then I got sucked into that world. I mean, that's a deep enough book, but I was really interested in all that even before, and still am now. I still learn a lot of that, the different esoteric elements because I find that they all sort of overlap into reality transurfing too, as well as as well as a lot of the modern self-help modalities too. So
Yeah. I think that's the key with like things to finding truth is like you see an overlap of principles. You might read three different books and they have the same concept but just worded differently. You know they're onto something that makes sense, you know. But yeah, that was just a side question I had. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually, unfortunately, we're gonna have to cut this slightly short. But I mean, I would love to have you on again for a part two if that's something you'd be interested in. But
yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. I gotta run too.
no
It's
problem.
fun to be able to take some time and talk about this stuff. I mean, I could talk about it for a long time, and I have. So, but I love it. So I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I massively appreciate it. And yeah, everyone, I'll put your, you know, your YouTube channel and all your links in the description below. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Bootsy, and we'll definitely do a part two and go a little bit deeper. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Dude, absolutely, man. My pleasure.